feel very located. A lot of energy here. Trees. And old people and babies. I've been called. I always feel the calling with my Dutch Calvinist roots. I'm afraid I've been called to feel. There's a lot going on. A lot going on. I sense on the program a lot of damaged goods. A lot of hostilities. A lot of people. Yes. A lot of people mad at people. There's a lot of masturbating going on. A lot of resentments. Strange things sexually and otherwise. But I forgive. I come from the earth and I forgive. I give peace to you.
I'm not patient. What the fuck is... Hey, Brian.
Ryan, you need to just... This is a song you should listen to. Listen to this song.
It sounds more exciting than what it is.
So let's see how we can lose our next 3 listeners.
Can I tell my goddamn story?
Let's try to work on our
testicles, 1, 2, testicles, 1, 2. All right, welcome.
What are we talking about?
And joining us right now here for our mega checking in the meantime. Hello, how's it going, sir? Wonderful. For anybody who's ever watched this in the meantime thus far in any of these episodes, you might recognize this gentleman from the Friends episode. This is Denis the Menace Cullen. Thank you. Hi, man. Hell yeah, dude. Good seeing you. Good.
You too, Dave.
Glad you're able to find some time. I'm glad I hit you up because I've just been following your stories on Instagram, and when you said you were bored, I'm like, that means idle time. I know my ends when I have one.
Yeah, you jumped right on that.
Fucking A. At the end of the episode, which I got good feedback from, when you said at the very end of the episode how you had some questions, and it's like you had this great idea that if I only would have thought ahead, probably could have. I enjoyed it myself. I had a great time editing it and a lot of people liked it because it was really just like, yeah, hanging out with a bunch of those random friends that we all had. You know, I think. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, I'm walking my guest.
I just turned off the radio.
But no, we all had some pretty, that group of friends, you know, minus a few other people, but that's like some people that influenced each other throughout the years. And then you had the great question at the end, like, I have some gaps in my memory that I wanted to connect with, but I'm like, God damn it, he's, you know, we could have had a history. And then that's when I was like, oh shit, well, why don't we do that with, because I think there's nobody else that I've known throughout my life that has had a stronger influence both on my creativity musically, as well as just my interest in music, than you. I think you're probably the most influential friend that I've had since we became interested in music. So I guess let's start there. We first crossed paths, yes, in elementary school, but when was like what was your first memory of like the first band that got you into music?
Oh man, the first, it's kind of hard to say, but I do remember having just a quest for heavy music my whole life. I had an older cousin who had like old school Ozzy and Iron Maiden T-shirts, and his room was plastered with posters. And I was like, that's what I'm looking for. And I was very sheltered, and my mom was scared of that kind of stuff, so she kept it away from me as long as possible. But then the first time I remember hearing a song, and it was Magic by the Cars. And I was next door at a neighbor's house who also had some older kids that lived there that had like Kiss posters and AC/DC, and I was just like, oh man, how do I get to this stuff? But I remember hearing that song. It was the video. They had MTV. We didn't have MTV. And it has, if you listen to that song, it has just some heavy distorted guitar. And that was what really like grabbed me. And then I just think it was all downhill from there.
I don't know about downhill, but
yeah, well, which is a lot of fun if you're on a bike.
Yeah, very true, very true.
I remember seeking heavy metal and really like being enthralled by like the image that Ozzy portrayed, and then hearing him for the first time and being really disappointed. I heard because that album Bark at the Moon, where he is a werewolf, and you think, oh, this is gonna be
an early song for me too. Yeah, that's like that song,
black metal, supreme. And then he's got this song on there called like I think it is So Tired. It's a ballad. Like I love that album now, but it was like, wait a minute, this didn't fit the image.
No, he has feelings. I think what you didn't realize is that earlier on he already said he was going through changes, and you're a child, so you got influenced by the darkest. Because that particular song, for you was Cars Magic, the song that hooked me. I think before there were a lot of pop hits. I remember from this tape, Chart Action '83, from the year 1983. I had this cassette. But the chief one on it that I got hooked into was The Police, Every Breath You Take, which is a very popular hit. But it was a haunting song. There was something about that song it's a creepy song. And even though it's this one of yearning and all that, I liked how creepy it was. And then this also that year, there were other creepy songs that were on Chart Action '83. Golden Earrings, Twilight Zone. Fucking love that song. That's you never heard, you don't remember? Golden Earrings more known for Radar Love. But then they came back after the 70s. I didn't know all this shit until I put it together when I'm older. But they had this song that I really enjoyed called Twilight Zone. And if you heard it, the song, that was Golden Earring. But that was because they were trying to adapt to the 80s. And so that was a hit. There's a couple others too that were like, it was this strange time of, pop music was going, and then Quiet Riot hit. They weren't on this cassette, but once Quiet Riot hit, that particular album was a big influence on me. And when you described your cousin's room, that was my Uncle Lewis's room. Like he had the imagery. I remember hearing probably Black Sabbath coming from there, and he would play electric guitar. He was in everything he was into. He was a big Van Halen head. Everything he's into, as I got older, I'd find corny as shit, and then come back to it later and be like, oh no, that shit's actually really cool, very technical and all that stuff. But he was into more the glam rock kind of era of all that stuff. But yeah, so that's why I'm drawing those parallels. So
I did a stint with glam rock for sure when I was.
We all did. We did.
And Motley Crue was a huge band for me.
But they even had an edge. Like when I think glam rock, I always still think like the more. I mean, that's not even so much because Motley Crue had like, even when they went kind of full glam, they still were like. I mean, just because they looked like chicks didn't mean they weren't going to fuck you up, that kind of thing. Whereas like Warrant, definitely a band you felt like you could take on the street, that kind of thing. So I don't know, but like, cause we've discussed. I mean, there's a great book by Chuck. What's his name? Chuck whatever. Fargo Rock City.
Oh yeah.
I'm forgetting his last name, but he's also got Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. Whatever that book. People can look that shit up. I'll find it and add the fucking images on this shit. But he wrote his book, where one of those books, I think it was Fargo Rock City, where he talked about what makes something metal versus like, you know, the hard rock and stuff like that. What's the difference between like Def Leppard early that, you know, we probably heard and were drawn to when it had a heavier crunch, and then when dude lost his arm and they went full on trying to get chicks with their songs. We're not into it as much anymore. Like we don't care about the Sugar on Me kind of era of Def Leppard. You know?
I think that's a great album, but
I don't know about that. I mean, Pyromania is alright, but I mean, I'd still listen to Hysteria and anything before that over.
I had Hysteria on cassette at one point when I was a kid.
No, that was, I mean, it was just those times, you know, there was, you know, Poison, that once they came into that, by the time Poison's Lurking, that was the last cassette that I got before being introduced to then Metallica, Anthrax, and the bands that 7th grade, as I call it, the 7th grade bands that kind of graduated one to puberty. So, but we would cross, because it wasn't apparent seeing you in elementary school that we were. I wouldn't consider myself a metalhead in elementary school. It wasn't until junior high that then, I mean, you may have been, but I didn't see you. You were a grade ahead of me.
Metalhead. I remember the last day of 5th grade, I wore a Metallica shirt, and that's where I finally broke my mom. And then in 6th grade, she let me wear my Iron Maiden shirts to school. And
Maiden was a band that Maiden would float around even before being a metalhead, because they were cracking into the pop kind of mainstream with Wasted Years a little bit.
Oh, well, my first album I ever bought was Piece of Time.
You knew of them. Yeah.
Piece of Mind by Iron Maiden. So that was the first record I ever bought. Still have it. But then I kind of floated, you know, and I was into Metallica fairly early too. The first cassette or the first Metallica I ever had was Kill 'Em All cassette. I still have that too. Wow. And that's heavy stuff. But then I kind of floated in between. Like I really didn't, you know, you'd think I would just go from right to that to Slayer and then.
No, you had Scorpions. I know that you were Scorpions.
I was a big Scorpions fan when I was a kid. Yeah, that was like my favorite band when I was a kid. Like, oh yeah, it's my favorite band. And then they were a guilty pleasure for a long time, and I think they're still a guilty pleasure. I go on tirades where I subject my family to long just bouts of Scorpions.
Well, somebody's got it.
It's good fun.
Yeah. No, it's funny because so you really were more, again, you kind of felt more of becoming the metalhead already, because you were a seasoned metalhead by the time I ran into you again in junior high, because you were the full on denim, you know, patches or a back patch of some kind.
Oh yeah, I think I did.
That was your full on identity. I was still like that because I was still, you know, I liked Run DMC. I was into some pop stuff. One band though, because when MTV kind of got introduced, I was into a lot of stuff that would be, I guess, I wouldn't go get their albums, but I would like their hits if it was played on heavy rotation in some cases. So it wasn't just metal that I would be drawn to, but one band that I still always, and I think a lot of people can agree from that era, that transcended all that metalheads had a lot of respect for, was ZZ Top. Being that was a band that played, even though they were a rock and roll band or like, you know, Southern rock or whatever, you know, their kind of thing, as you mature, if you get into metal and even as a musician or whatever, people would go back and discover ZZ Top and be like, oh, these guys are actually pretty cool. You know,
I didn't know how cool they were until I found that Tres Amigos album. Used, and then I was like, oh, then it's like 1973. I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know, until then, all I really knew about them was like Legs.
Eliminator. We all knew Eliminator, but there's one song on Eliminator that even though all of their pop shit, that's fine, but the one song on Eliminator that I still say is like badass is Under Pressure. And you know, they didn't make a video for that shit. Because she likes cocaine. You can't put that in a video, you know. So, but anyway, so now junior high,
See, I thought you were a little ahead of the curve on me with that stuff. I think your mom was a lot cooler than me, and she probably let you buy cooler stuff.
Not. Well, here's the thing.
I remember borrowing cassettes from you.
That was junior high. Junior high. But here's the thing about my mother. It wasn't that she was cooler by any means. It was the fact that I again had expressed a broad interest in music that wasn't exactly. Again, it wasn't. I had interests in stuff that had dark imagery and stuff here and there, combined with just general interests in, other movies, kids shit. My favorite movie for years was Airplane. All right. That's the, I would lose my shit watching when shit hit the fan. All right. When Kramer hears about this, the shit's going to hit the fan. She sees her son losing his shit to that for 7 minutes afterwards. Like, I got to pause the video cassette if we had it recorded because I'm dying laughing at that. I don't think she was too concerned about, him worshiping Satan. Okay. Like that was, he was worshiping shit. But then the stuff I think that I drew an interest into horror movies once I got introduced to those in like 5th and 6th grade. And, and the music would be there, but not, again, it wasn't, I wasn't wearing all black t-shirts most of the time and that kind of shit. That came with 7th grade. And eventually that was where I think skateboarding got me into that culture more once I got into 7th grade. Cause once 7th grade hit, I basically almost like immediately was hanging out more with Chris Nornberg, who we know, and our skateboarding circle, or skating. But we had Matt Walden, Tony Roderick. There was a guy, Josh VJ, we also hung out with from time to time. And we were just skating, and they were the guys that were listening to a variety of music that then introduced me to metal. And then once I got into more the real heavy shit, because I'd heard glam rock and I'd heard some of the stuff that was heavier. I knew of Motley Crue and all of that. Never really got that into them, but I loved Bark at the Moon. I loved Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, the song primarily, and Ultimate Sin, like some of those songs.
I had that.
I still, again, but it wasn't until they played me, and it wasn't even Metallica, it was Anthrax first. And I think Anthrax, something about their combination of playing what sounded really heavy with like an attitude of like, it wasn't that, it wasn't this, it wasn't trying to get chicks per se, but it was also a lot of fun. Like they made it look fun. They made the mayhem look fun, as opposed to like the dark imagery bullshit. Like they also kind of had an air of weirdness to them. But there was something that was just, almost like we're wacky thrash. Like there's something weird that was a little more palatable to a kid like me. I don't know.
Yeah, I was into Anthrax a bunch when I was a kid. In fact, I was in New York City in like 85 or something, and I picked up Fistful of Metal and Armed and Dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And being in New York City at that time, it was just super crazy. I didn't know how close to it I really was at the time, but unfortunately, I don't have any of my Anthrax records anymore.
Hey, live and learn. Live and learn. It's funny, but those are even the albums that I don't even have, because I pretty much go from Spreading the Disease on, and I didn't even get into Spreading the Disease like retroactively at first. I was strictly Among the Living up until Persistence of Time from that whole era. But what happened was once I got introduced to those albums, I went obsessive on cassettes of that whole genre. Like I was like, you know what? It was almost like a switch went off where I'm like, I am now too old. Like it was like, I can't play with action figures anymore. No more Poison, no more Def Leppard, Goodbye Cinderella, Long Cold Winter. All of those cassettes, no. That's kid shit right there. It's now Anthrax. Megadeth I would try to get into more or less, but not, I didn't really get too into Megadeth as much. But Metallica, the Master of Puppets, and Ride the Lightning, and then I think Justice just came out around that time. And then there were other, was Testament. Testament was one of the big ones in my head when I got introduced to that, and that was really more 8th grade, because then what was it? Mike Still's older brother, Jerry, basically sent me home. I hung out with him, and he sent me home with a Ziploc bag full of cassettes to borrow. and I just dubbed every single one of them. And there was some, every MOD, SOD, DRI, like all the acronym or the abbreviation bands. Wehrmacht was even in that grouping. All right, if you remember Wehrmacht, Drink Beer, Be Free, or whatever the fuck that album was.
I never had that stuff, but I remember.
It was his most proud one because it was the most obscure. But I mean, I got Suicidal Tendencies, How Will I Laugh Tomorrow, like a bunch of that shit. Just that whole era of just the thrash, the crossover shit, and whatever else. And then that was where like a lot of that switch went off. And then by the time we crossed paths and started being friendly to one another,
that was later. Oh, well, that was. You mean still in junior high?
It dissolved. Yeah, we're in junior high point because like 7th grade was when you were kind of dickish. Later 7th grade for me. I mean, you were 8th grade. I think you were 8th or not. Yeah, you were 8th grade. Yeah. That was again just with we established
rough times for Denis.
We know. We established this with the previous Friends episode, but we just knew that you were a sincere music metalhead, and as Jason and I would encounter you, it was the other guy that was like, this guy likes music, but the guy with him seems like a poser, because he's the one who's more aggressive about wanting to pick on us and be the typical kind of bully. And then when he was gone, that's when you would show up and we would talk music. And then that was like, because it's strange how that happens. It's just like you're kind of drawn to the people that like you kind of like sense who's really into this shit and who's just kind of wearing this shit as an identity, So.
Yeah, I have a lot of weird, just disparate collection of memories from. And I know the guy you're talking about that I was hanging out with then. And it's just weird to think about how I started hanging out with him and who I was hanging out with before that and after. And it's always kind of just people would come and go. Yeah. I didn't really have a solid foundation of friends. I was always kind of just a social butterfly back then. And that's kind of how it was with you guys for a long time. I was really never in your clique. But
we didn't think of it as a clique really as much as I think the thing about it, because that clique was more made up of, again, individuals. Like just
but you guys were a unit almost. I think you
at times, yeah.
Like Girl, you guys were smart. Like when you guys talk about like the dumb, like that's where I was coming from. I was in the dumb,
but we would see you because again, it wasn't again 8th grade rolls around, or I'm in 8th grade now. You're in 9th grade. And that was when we started, because Jason and I went to our first concert together around that time, and we went to go see Faith No More at the Omni. We didn't even get to see Faith No More. We ended up seeing Primus. Oh, and wow. We didn't know who the fuck Primus was.
And that was 8th grade for you?
That was 8th grade, and my parents drove us to that concert because we saw in the ads it was all ages, even though these were bars, and it was at the Omni and like. In Oakland and
drink tickets.
Yeah, and it was so funny just the way that like that whole culture. It's so insane to look back on it and realize what kids we were allowed to go to. This west or this not west, but in the middle of Oakland on Martin Luther King, across the street from a crack house, and like we could go to those shows. We had to have the all ages, whatever the fuck and you would see the older, metalheads or whatever, and they would be like, "What's up, little dude?" That kind of shit. And that shit would never happen today. Like, or when we have all ages shows, they're usually teenagers, not 12-year-olds.
Yeah, I wonder.
It's so funny.
I remember starting to go to thrash shows and pretty young, 13, 14.
But you were a little cued into some of the teen scene, though. Like, I think you went to Gilman at that time, didn't you? Or
not by that age, no. I didn't start going to Gilman probably till 15 or...
That's still teenager. That's still... my first time at Gilman was my early 20s. I'm already an old man going to Gilman. Like, I never even knew of Gilman until I was in my early 20s.
But you got to play at Gilman. I never got to play there.
Yeah, it's overrated, man. It really wasn't that big a deal.
Notch on my bedpost, that's all.
I already had a resentment towards that whole fucking place that killed my joy of playing there. Yeah. So junior high rolls around because this is where I remember the first time that after we had our conversations of music here and there, very few of them, thing that where we would start to be friendly over music was a Laz Rocket cassette. That either I had a Laz Rocket cassette, the one I forget the name, No Mercy or whatever the fuck it was. It's a guy's got a gun. It's a cartoon dude with the gun on the front of it.
I remember borrowing it from you, but I don't know if that album made too much of an impression on me because I don't remember.
Probably not. No, it was you know, I don't even own it still.
A few more. I mean, I don't remember which ones, but I think I was borrowing.
That was the one I just remembered. You saw me. I was looking at it at some point. I don't think I was trying to show it off to get your attention, but I remember looking at it. And you rolled up and then you were asking about it. And then, and I was, again, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Here, man. Yeah. Check it out. You know, and I was, you know, how uptight I am about shit, you know. Now imagine this is 8th grade. So that's just telling you how, you know, I was trying to be cool with the older kid lending the cassette and shit. So I lent that, maybe some other shit I don't even remember. And then after that, that's not too long after that was when we would attend a show. At
the Stone.
We went to the Stone. We went to, I think, 2 different shows at the Stone.
Did we go to Suicidal and Pantera?
No, I missed that one. I wanted to, but I think I was out of town or something was up with that one. What
shows did we go to at the Stone?
That's exactly what I was trying to recall before this whole thing. I definitely know Violence. We went to see Violence at the video shoot because that was the packed one. Okay. Slambodians were the middle act. I forget who was opening up first.
Maybe Epidemic or something, huh?
Not Epidemic. It might have been Chaos or one of those bands. But it wasn't. There was that one. There was another show that I went to, and it might have been with you. Or you were there, so we might have gone together. We saw it at the Omni, and it was one of those shows where it was acts like, you know, local bands and whatever, because we saw a band called Broken Man from Hawaii.
That was Omni, huh? Are you sure that was Omni?
That was at the Omni. I remember distinctly because there was not many people there. There were bands. There were a bunch of. I don't remember any of the other bands almost.
Like Wrecking Machine.
Could have been Wrecking Machine. I know Tyrannicide might have had something to do with it because you were big on Tyrannicide.
A little later though.
The Nameless Ones was one of their friend bands that was part of, like, they were friends with Tyrannicide. There were just, again, some of these local bands that we would see around.
I thought that show was at the Stone that we went.
No, it was at the Omni. I do remember it distinctly at the Omni.
I do remember it being very cool that your parents drove us all the way and picked us up.
They would pick us up. It was because they were just scared. They were scared shitless. I'm not gonna lie. They were like, because they didn't want me taking BART and fucking, you know, whatever other fucking bullshit.
I used to take BART and walk up to the Stone.
Yeah, no, I knew you did.
By myself many times.
We took BART we did take BART. I know going to the Stone. I don't know if we took BART going home.
Oh, maybe they picked us up.
I think somebody picked us up, but we took BART going because we went with Jake. What's his name? I think his name was Jake.
My buddy Jake.
Jake Ludlow.
Jake Ludlow, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I remember going with him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was a cool dude. And so, yeah, but I think that was around 8th grade going into, for me, 8th grade going to 9th grade, 9th grade going on to the high school.
Uh-huh.
And so, because we went to but primarily Violence and that one thrash show, and there might have been one other one in there that's I'm just drawing a blank on. But it wasn't a lot of shows. But it was like
getting into underground stuff, going to the Stone, and getting flyers from bands. And I remember seeing Immortal Fate there when they were a thrash band still.
Yeah.
And then that band Chaos from Hayward, which ended up being like probably the first demo I ever ordered through the mail. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up hanging out with them because by that time, when I started ordering demos and zines, like I probably got one zine landing in my mailbox, and then like probably the next day I started my zine. I'm like, oh, but this is photocopied. Let's do this, Mm-hmm. And then so I would probably be writing bands every day and sending off for demos, and so that's probably how that started.
I remember Epidemic was one of those. Yeah, because they were from Southern California, if I'm not mistaken.
No, they were from the peninsula, like Palo Alto.
Maybe I thought they were from Southern California. I don't know where they were. Because I remember writing to them, and I might have gotten something through the mail from them. And
I still have their demos, and I was really into them. I thought they were cool. They were heavy.
Yeah.
And then they were actually, so when I got into the zines and everything, there was a guy who Marco Barbieri, who did a zine called NGF, and it stands for something that I'm not going to say out loud. But
why not?
No Glam something.
What's that?
No Glam Fools.
Oh, got it. The slur now, modern day slur.
Yeah, and it was something I didn't have any qualms with saying back then. But
who did? I mean, it was it was a very bigoted word, like subtext of bigotry in metal back then.
But he ended up managing Epidemic and another band called the Horde of Torment, who actually lived.
I remember Horde of Torment. That's another one I remember. This
guy Marco Barbieri ended up moving down to Southern California and being a publicist for Metal Blade.
Oh, you can see that.
And I was pretty tight with him, and so he was sending me all the Metal Blade stuff, and I was on any guest list I wanted to go. For any show I wanted to get into, which was just a really weird thing for a 15-year-old kid to be doing.
It's exciting. That's you had the inside track on that kind of shit, and that's because that's one of the things when we learned later on. I remember one of our little hookups that we thought we'd found was learning about KFJC. And calling in to their when they would offer free tickets for shows that no one in the middle of the afternoon is calling them for, and we got free tickets to go see Napalm Death and other bands that we're excited to see, and when we found that little hookup, it's like we would try to be on that as much as possible.
And that was almost too easy. Yeah, between them and KZSU, I'd be winning tickets and music all the time.
Yeah.
Like I remember being like, we'll be accepting the fifth caller. I'd call right away. I'm like, you're caller number 2. I'm like, hang up, call again. Yeah.
No, if they had the number, the caller or whatever, it's like nobody's calling, motherfucker. I'm not gonna call you 12 times to get to caller number 12. I mean, what really was just sort of an instinct for you because you were doing the mailing things. And because I did a little bit of mailing stuff, but I would even do it with some of the more mainstream bands, and then start getting on fan lists, fan mail lists type shit here and there later on, which then resulted in some free 7-inch records from like bands like Pearl Jam years later that are actually kind of valuable today. I found out.
You still have that stuff?
Oh yeah, I still got them. Awesome. But then one of the things you did,
I would have been like, "Fuck this."
Exactly. No, a lot of people did. A lot of people would have. But it helped that one of the songs was pretty cool. They did a cover of Sonic Reducer by the Dead Boys or whatever, so that was pretty good.
Oh, Dead Boys, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even know the Dead Boy. I was like, this song is good, and they didn't even write it. That was all I was thinking. I remember you described it really well later on, was that you were always looking for something that was like further from, like taking it over from the edge than you were previously, like looking for something that kind of just kept pushing it further and further over the edge, because then you started finding bands that then so like cut to high school. You're again a year older than me, but I think you already started going into independent study.
Well, like, Dave. So I think my grade was the last grade. That 9th grade was at the junior high.
No, we were. You were in.
We were at the same time then, huh?
No, we were the last grade. We were, because you went. You were still 9th grade at the junior high. We were the last 9th grade at the junior high. The very next year, the 9th grade came with us.
Oh, I had that wrong.
Yeah, but it felt that way because everybody knew that the 9th grade was going to be moving back to the high school.
Yeah, and I didn't know independent study was the last quarter of junior year, and then the last 3 quarters of senior year for me.
Because I remember seeing you more around campus at the high school early on. This was like early on when I was there, because I was taking the guitar class the last year that they offered the guitar class at the high school, and you had a patch on of a band that has become since highly influential. And I think he had a T-shirt too, but that was ASBESTOSDEATH. That was one of your favorite patches and shirts that you would wear at the time. And then also, because so sophomore year, I was hanging around a lot with Amit Kapoor, both freshman year and sophomore year, and he was everything about metal that I hated sometimes, but we had common ground because he's a devout metalhead, but he tends to lean more towards what I found was the bonehead end of the spectrum. Big Pantera fan, especially when they started doing Vulgar Display of Power. He's into a lot of the chugga chugga, what eventually evolved into like new metal, you know, kind of that kind of shit. And I tended to lean more towards stuff that was a little more outcastish, like, you know. But we had middle ground. Like we would go to shows. We'd go see DRI. I remember, and we saw Body Count when they did a first tour ever with like opening for DRI last minute. That was like a year before they blew up at Lollapalooza. And I'm forgetting what other shows that I would roll with him. And there were other friends that I remember. I'd go see Guar shows with people. Or
I
Greg
saw
Dave.
Guar twice. Did you and I go to see Guar? Probably.
Could have. I remember more going to see Guar with Greg Davis, if you remember him.
I saw Guar at the Omni once, and then
You might have gone too. You might have gone with us, or you might have gone on your own.
probably
We definitely probably crossed paths there because Agony Column would open for them. First time I saw Guar was actually at the Warfield, and then I saw them the second time at the Omni.
That's probably the one that I went to.
Yeah,
Agony Column, because then that would have been a Metal Blade thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I remember Agony Column, man. I just the guy. I remember his vocals with him. Yeah, we had this vocal kind of thing. He was like a balding, long hair guy. He would always have his shirt off, and he would do this weird thing when he wasn't singing. And I just remember thinking, like, this band's like, I'm like, do I like the band? No, but I love this, how fucking weird this dude is. He's like the crypt keeper for a lead singer. And everybody hated it from the Guar audiences would show up early. This was like what led me to a very influential part of my life. But I couldn't understand the mentality of audiences, both Guar audiences and any other audience, that would go to a show early to see to be a diehard fan of the headliner, but they show up early just to boo or shit on every single one of the bands before the opening or before the band they came to see. It just seems like, I'm like, why are you putting so much energy into that shit? And that was a thing, especially with Guar audiences. And Agony Column, I just remember them being, Agony Column to me in wrestling terms, they were the jobber of every Guar show. Their job was to go out there, not even like warm them up. It was like get the energy going of like them hating on a band. Like, and they would just be up there performing their songs to booze and get, fuck you, Guar, and all that shit.
Perfect for that. Well, it's funny because I had all their promo stuff, so it was just kind of another band that,
exactly
fell into my lap, and I thought they were okay, or whatever. I don't think anyone really remembers that band, but I remember them really well for some reason because Keith latched onto that band. and Keith,
that makes so much more sense.
Keith thought they were fun, and you know how Keith will just adopt a personality based on something, so he was just going around going, bah, bloody knuckles, bah, doing the Guar or the.
We got to send him some links to Agony Column just to remind him, like, hey, dork, you liked them. Yeah. Just to really remind him.
He liked to mock them, or I think he liked
that makes more sense. That makes more sense knowing him. Yeah, because but it would have been great if he really did like them.
He didn't like a lot of the stuff I was into. I think he saw the more humor in the stuff that I took more seriously. Like, no, man, this is grindcore, and he's like, yeah, it's grindcore. Okay.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he's the fact is Keith was more emo at the time than he cared to admit.
Oh no, he was all Morrissey.
Exactly.
He turned me on to Misfits. He turned me on to Butthole Surfers back when we were like 16. So.
So he did have some good taste.
He was really into like Jane's Addiction and stuff, and I couldn't care less about that stuff at the time.
Yeah, we had our guy Wyatt, who which you knew Wyatt, and
I knew Wyatt since I was
Wyatt was into Jane's Addiction and what is the other Red Hot Chili Peppers before they really became the slap of the bass band, and but yeah, they were all about those bands. Was it the Cramps? They'd be getting into the Cramps, and some of the goth death rock kind of shit that I was never had no interest in. There was one band I liked that had a song called "I'm Alive," and I can't remember the name of their band for the life of me. They were like on par with like The Cure and all that kind of modern rock era.
Oh, I'm alive.
I'm alive.
Yeah.
So alive. They had a hit song. It was like their one hit song.
Jesus and Mary Chain or something. I don't know.
It's it's not Jesus and Mary Chain. That was, but I do. There were like I'm thinking like something with knives or I don't know, like murder with. They had some corny ass fucking name. They were advertised in Thrasher magazine. Pearl Jam better not fucking come up. Well, Celine Dion comes up first. Anyway, I'll find it. So anyways, but then what ended up happening, junior year, the thing that, well, even before junior year, you were like you said, junior year, you got an independent study. I didn't see you for a long time, and out of nowhere, we hadn't talked to each other really in like over a year, I think it was. And I remember distinctly one afternoon, I got a call, because phone calls were a big deal back then. And I got a phone call. It was you, and Love and Rockets. That was the name of the band. So Alive. That was the name of the song. I got a phone call from you in the middle of the afternoon, and you're like, "Hey, Dave, it's Denis. What's going on, man?" And I was like, "Oh shit, hey, yeah, long time no see." It was one of the cooler things, because we may have, when you were still back at school, I remember we went over, Meet Kapoor and I tried jamming with you one afternoon. That was when you were woke before woke ever was a thing, because you were trying to have a band with all ethnicities, and that was your thing right then.
Oh, you guys are brown. Come on,
and long hair. Like, you guys like this shit. And Amit couldn't play. God bless Amit, man. He's still a metalhead to this day. Huh?
Did we even try jamming at all?
The thing is, he's proof that, like, again, sometimes school isn't about actually teaching you something, but the effort. Because he got A's and B's in his guitar class throughout the year, and he couldn't keep rhythm to save his fucking life, man.
That we jammed.
He just never. Well, no, he tried. We tried. I tried to get him. I dumbed down riffs, tried to get him. He just honestly did not have like the ability to maintain a sense of rhythm on an instrument, and it's had to learn that shit the hard way with certain people. It's like, God bless them. They can love music. You don't need to have rhythm to go jump in a pit, and so that's just kind of how it was. But then after that was again like my sophomore year, you and junior. But later, I hadn't seen you and talked to you in a long time, and I got that phone call, and we ended up talking for probably at least like about an hour and a half. I remember having a long conversation, and we were just talking music, and it was and that was one of those things that I'm like, like, again, because even still with the friends that I was, because I went from hanging out with Amit most of sophomore year to then I don't even know how it happened, but I ended up more hanging out with Jason. I then reconnected with Jason Wrinkle, Daryl, and that group, and hung out with them more over the summer and into my junior year.
What the point of my phone call was?
I think it was the end of your junior and the end of my sophomore year. Like,
I wonder what my point for calling
you just called me up to see what was up, and we were talking. Okay. We just talked bands. We literally were talking music. Like, it was just like, you probably just like, I wonder what Dave Gordillo's up to. And like, beginning of junior year, you handed me the first of I don't know how many you made, but the first time I got a copy of Atmosphere magazine, which was your zine that you were making at the time. I remember distinctly seeing bands in there that I'd never heard of. 976 was one. Capitalist Casualties was one. And you gave that to me on the day, because on my birthday, on my birthday of beginning of junior year, so that's 1992, September 9th, or around that time of my birthday, I was having a birthday party / show because we had the band Snotlocker, and you had your one-man band Pity Party, and you were opening for us. I think also Ben might have been doing his band with Ray, his best friend Ray too, that day, called Job, or it was Job. Yeah, I think it was called Job. Or no, that was another band later. I forget the name of his original band, but they joked calling it Primus. That's right. But they ended up. We had our show at my parents' house. You gave me that zine, and Richie Barr came over. Also, I became friends with him later. He just went to CD Warehouse, looked up, found something that just looked like it would be up my alley, wrapped it and gave it to me, and that CD was Capitalist Casualty's Disassembly Line, a band I had never heard of until I just looked in your zine, and now I have the CD of the band that I've never heard of in this zine. And not only that, at that time, it was probably some of the more craziest shit that I've heard, just being like this hybrid of punk rock and metal. Like they were like in that in-between, which became known as power violence at some point, where like with just really more bands of an era, more that were like kind of hybrids without really like a particular genre. But you then were part of what essentially was like zine culture and what became the do-it-yourself, or what is the do-it-yourself scene that goes back to early hardcore punk days, and that was brewing all throughout that time. So what are some of your memories of that shit? I don't know.
I mean, I remember that show at your house, and that was funny because I was just out of left field there, and it was kind of a novelty. Dennis jumping around doing that, and I remember seeing that CD on your kitchen counter, going, "All right, Dave, yeah, you know."
Yeah, it made me look like I was into the band, and I'm like, I just got this today. I just fucking got this today, literally.
Good start, right?
It was all Richie Barr. Richie's like, "This looks good, man," and he grabs it, and fucking that's as much as it was thought through. So funny. So funny.
Oh man, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what's your question?
I said, what do you remember from that time of, like, you know, I don't know. You were the only one I knew from our school that was into DIY, underground DIY music culture.
I think you're right, man. I think there was nobody else.
There was no one else.
You know, and that stems back from, from back to junior high. I remember being a metalhead, and that was very much of an outcast thing. And I remember a metal band played, like some older kids had a metal band. You might remember this. Played at like a lunchtime.
Yeah,
thing,
I do remember that. Yeah,
whatever. And they played like some Metallica covers or whatever. I remember going. My next class after that was woodshop, and I remember going back there and people making fun of me. I wasn't in the band, but they're like, "Oh, Dennis, did you like that? Yeah, were you headbanging? Yeah, I'll bet you really like that." And I remember that being a monumental moment for me because, it didn't matter what I was into. I got used to really quickly no one else getting what I was into. No one else, I was not into any popular stuff, at least from where I was standing. Where we were, metal was not popular.
Totally.
Where I was standing, and then so that kind of just opened the door for me to get into underground. When I started to discover underground stuff, and that was just a whole new world, and that was the heavy shit I was looking for. Yeah. And I kept finding these heavier bands. It's like, oh man, you're finding this thrash metal band. Yeah, but this band, the album is kind of glossy and it's overproduced. Check this band out. This band has a demo and it's rough. And it's like, oh yeah, it sounds dirty. I like that. And then you go like, oh, thrash metal. Thrash metal's weak, man. Look at this stuff. This is death metal. They're like, death metal. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Further,
and it's like death metal. Oh, death metal. So, last year, man, grindcore now. Grindcore. I remember everything. I mean, how far can you take it? And then I remember really, eventually it all kind of culminated for me. I mean, getting crazy noise, noise music, like noise.
Just noise.
Metal, grinding on metal. And then I really got into that band Ruins, where that was kind of like the pinnacle for me of how extreme you could get. I mean, it's listening to it now, it's maybe not as extreme as some grindcore, whatever.
Well, the technical aspect of them being that, I mean, they were highly influenced by prog.
And it was just out there. It was out there. It was like super out there, and it was still heavy, gong, gong, and just really loud and heavy. And then after that, I was like, okay, you know, I think I found, you know, what I was looking for.
Limit.
You know, let's listen to something with violins in it or something. You know? That's where I started getting into jazz and just getting into lighter, you know, indie rock and stuff like that, and just like, it doesn't have to be like pulling your guts out.
That was more your 20s though, because you're glazing through high school a little bit.
Oh, in high school, I was all just death metal and grindcore, but things would change rapidly.
Yeah, no, but then also you were the first person that we knew who was into this band, ASBESTOSDEATH, that became Sleep. I mean, you were in, so it wasn't just like things being fast. Things could be extremely slow,
heavy,
you know,
heavy.
Yeah, just heavy, really heavy, dirgy and whatnot. Just there was an extreme. There was usually the word extreme before it became a buzzword for, you know, real stupid commercialism. Just being that the music itself had a certain intensity to
yeah,
it.
you know, and ASBESTOSDEATH was one of those bands. They were just so fucking heavy, and it's just so like, you know, dismal. And I mean, that's what spoke to me. You know, I just found beauty in things that were
ugly.
Thought were pretty ugly. Yeah,
fucking ugly. I actually said that when I got to do a report on on the Melvins in college. I gave an oral presentation I played them a song. And then gave them an oral presentation of why I appreciated it, and I'm like, I ended up dropping that class, but yeah.
But ASBESTOSDEATH was a good it's a good example of where I was at a lot of different times, because at that point it was super underground stuff. They had their self-released first 7-inch. I didn't have the demo before that, but and then I was into like the Profane Existence, gutter punk type of stuff, and they had their second 7-inch was out on that, and I probably got that as a promo from them. I was from the zine. And then, you know, it kind of corresponded with me kind of getting into being a stoner, and they transitioned perfectly. It's like, oh yeah, you guys want to, you know, are sounding like Black Sabbath now. I love that. You know, I was really looking back and discovering old Black Sabbath and stuff like that. And so
yeah, it was a pretty big leap from. I mean, they were still fairly ASBESTOSDEATH-ish with Volume 1.
Yeah.
Volume 1, but then between Volume 1 and Holy Mountain is definitely a huge. It's like they all dropped acid, read the Bible, and they were on to Holy Mountain. So
I mean, I recorded it when they played live on KFJC actually, before Holy Mountain was released, before they had shown everyone their new sound. And
I remember
hearing that, going, oh my God! And most people who were fans were like, I'm out. You know, but I was
like anything with change.
I really embraced it. I was like, this is awesome. Like, I like what they're doing, you know, because
they were ahead of. I mean, they were about to pretty much reinvent the wheel, like in a big way. You know.
Well, the whole stoner rock thing that came after that, like I held Sleep with high regard.
We all did. Yeah.
I liked what they did. We were dropping acid. We were listening to that. You know, Holy Mountain. We got it when it first came out. I was trading records with a guy in Europe, and he sent me a vinyl copy over, like unsolicited. He's just like, "Oh, I know you like this band. Like here." But they were really unknown and hated. You know, in the it seemed like, and then they became kind of this lore building up to Dope Smoker, and so it was a cult thing. But I forget where I was going with this. Oh yeah, the whole stoner rock thing that came out of that, I hated. Like I think all this stoner rock is just groove rock. You know,
it depends on the band, because here was the thing. Because I came from during that whole time when you were getting into more underground zine culture. One of the things for that my friendship with Jason and before Amit kind of came along, but I still carried on my own through my friendship with Amit. I got introduced to a couple bands, like namely one of the huge influences on me was Godflesh in 8th grade. I got influenced heavily by them, and I followed them they were one of the, as soon as I heard Street Cleaner, I got introduced to them through a guy, I forget his name, I think his name was Dave also, and he worked at the fairgrounds. He had a DRI hat, and he would see me with like a Suicidal Tendencies shirt or whatever, and we knew each other because he worked a concession stand, I worked at one, and he's an older guy, but he started talking to me about music one day, and we were talking bands, and he introduced me to Godflesh, the Rollins band, and I think he may have suggested one or two other bands or whatever, and I followed up on that right away. I like Rollins band, even though I didn't really care too much for Henry Rollins himself, but his band sounds great. They still were like, they were solid players, but Godflesh was like a whole sound that just flipped my fucking wig. And then come to then find out, as I got into the, earache bands, which were then all stemmed from England and that whole Napalm Death evolution, and like how many bands came out of Napalm Death, that were like in Napalm Death and then started their own shit, is countless. And then, but Godflesh evolved from that scene. But then being introduced to then Ministry, also in 8th grade, and getting to introduce Jason to Ministry because I think Wyatt put me onto them. Like somehow Wyatt got a hold of it. I heard it. He let me the tape one class, and I'm listening to it. I'm like, this is fucking amazing. Because it's just and they're a band that took metal sounds, but made it something completely fucking different. And then starting to find, and then Butthole Surfers being like, I couldn't appreciate until I think later, until after like I started getting introduced to drugs. But knowing of them, the name alone was like provocative. And then what's funny is bands like Gwar, Primus, Faith No More to some extent, even though Faith No More kind of blew up. Those were bands that I liked, but I could start to feel like they were like, I always compare them like, they were like the Muppets. There was a time that I loved the Muppets. And then as I get older, I could still appreciate the Muppets, but I'm not going to be like going back and watching the Muppets for like my main comedy fare. It's like, that was a time Gonzo was cool and shit. And then now I'm on to this other stuff that, is definitely gives me more of the nightmarish images that I like in my head that like horror movies and other stuff would expose me to. But there was a point at which it still had to have something catchy. Like there was still a pop hook in a lot of what I liked, versus where I think you went into tangents that got into a lot more of the extreme technical side of things that I still hadn't developed an appreciation for. Because like when I first heard Capitalist Casualties, I love that bass line that introduces you to Capitalist Casualties. I can't remember a fucking song after that because they're so technically just so involved and the songs are short, whatever. But I will forever remember. I'll forever remember that. That's a catchy ass fucking bass line that just introduces you to this whole, new genre that they invented. And then a lot of bands following suit. And but the band that then again I think brought you and me back together in this kind of in this convergence of music percolating in our heads was when I saw Gwar finally get to see this band that I've heard a lot about, didn't know much about. I knew that they played free shows in our area and had no idea they lived in our area. And then fucking Nirvana breaks and they name drop this band along with, saying they're like, oh, I like when Kurt Cobain says he likes listening to Public Enemy and the Melvins. And I'm like, the fucking band that plays free shows at the Omni is Kurt Cobain's a fan of? Are you fucking kidding me? And then Gwar later in late sophomore year, that was when I first saw the Melvins doing a split bill with Gwar. And I got to be introduced to the Melvins in the best way possible, which was them trying to aggravate an audience. Which was anytime the Melvins, nothing will ever. It was definitely like doing a drug for the first time that became your favorite drug, because nothing is really. I've seen other shows where they still were like hit and miss, but nothing compares to what they did to that Gwar audience that night. Just aggravating the fuck out of that crowd, answering what I would talk about earlier was, people show up, Gwar audiences would show up early, shit on all the opening bands, and here was this band. There's no other opening band. It's just gonna be Melvins and Gwar. They're equally billed, and so we see their amps. there's something just weird about their setup. Never saw a setup quite like theirs. I remember seeing the pinwheel thing, the spoke or whatever that Dale would hit on his. Yeah, that like his drum set had even just in their setup alone, you could tell something was different about them. And then they turned on their amps and went backstage and just let their shit feed back for a deafening 30 to 40 minutes. That's what it felt like. I mean, I was a kid. It could have been just 15, 20 minutes, but I'm pretty sure, because it's in the Melvin's book, I'm pretty sure they did it for like 30 to 40 minutes. And they had it at a deafening volume. People were holding their eardrums. These fans were getting pissed. And there were two guys that I still remember them to this day. I was in the very front, off slightly to the left, and there were these two guys right dead center who didn't look like your average dumbass Guar fan. If anything, they look like they look like guys that would be in the Nirvana video. There was something alternative about them. They had like shoulder length long hair and shit, and they're both like kind of like they're smiling, and they both were smoking weed. So they're smoking weed, they're passing a bowl between each other. I still hadn't smoked weed at that time, and then they're the only ones. They even were covering their ears, but they were smiling. Like there was something about it. Like, and I'm like, they're in on something. These guys are fucking with this crowd, and they know it. And because what they would do, Buzzo or Joe, one of them would come out, put on the instrument as if they were like, checking some, take it back off, and go right backstage. They did that I swear to God, it was so funny. And I'm like, they're doing this on purpose. They're doing what I've wondered, what do you do? Like they are aggravated. They are shaking the fucking hornet's nest. And it was so goddamn funny. And then I went to that show with, I think, Doug and James Marshall. That's who I went with to that show. And then, and so then they come out, and then they proceed to play. Bullhead was out. I didn't know this at the time, but it was before Lysol, so I'm pretty sure it was Bullhead, because I remember they played Boris. I'm pretty sure they opened with Boris, and their primary lineup of songs was stuff from Bullhead, Eggnog, and Ozma and Gluey Porch Treatments. Like, so those are the songs that stuck out. And they played these songs that made no sense to me. They were not catchy in the sense that I just remember how heavy it was. It was louder than anything I heard, and weird looking, because dude had his pineapple. He had the pineapple head at the time, where he just had the long hair on the top. His whole side of his head was shaved. He looked like a pineapple. And
I have pictures of that from his
and he had his Les Paul, his old Les Paul, where he had it down to his knees with the Kiss sticker on it. And I'm looking at him like, Kiss? Fucking Kiss sucks. What the fuck is that on? But I loved their attitude of just shameless, because this was also at the time when we could pick up on people were trying to be weird for weird's sake. And, you had Mike Patton that was making, wore his Mr. Bungle shirt in the fucking Faith No More video. And then everybody's like, what's this Mr. Bungle? And it's just, it's just the smartest advertising he ever fucking did. Because that was the whole point of his career in Faith No More, was to push this fucking band that was his real band. And just it hooked into people, and it was and watching this band that basically was like, oh, here's a band that is not anything. This is not going to be commercially adaptable in any way, shape, or form, and yet they've answered my question of how do you deal with a Guar audience when a Guar audience hates you. And I walked out of that show just like I had mad respect for that opening band, or not opening, but the split bill band, because by the time Guar went on, half of that audience was gone. Like they walked half the Guar audience, and it was the best Guar show in my opinion, because there was room, and I wasn't surrounded by. I got to now stand in the front and get fucking sprayed on by the peed on and bled on without having to be smashed by a million fucking people, and it was a fun Guar show. Oh God, it was so fun, and I thank the Melvins for that.
The Melvins, huh?
It was. And then I ended up buying the Ozma cassette right after. And the funny thing about that, because Jason was intrigued by this, was the fact that I bought this cassette. It had a weird smell to it. There's even a song called Creepy Smell on Ozma. And it literally smelled like the tape smelled like the show. It smelled like BO of like a bunch of mostly white dudes at the show. It was like it's like somebody rubbed it in their armpit and left it in the cassette. It just had this weird funk to it. And I remember telling Jason that, and he just died laughing when I said it's like yeah, it smells like the show. I don't know why. Like it just smells like this weird. It's like a BO cassette or something. And it's always intrigued me. And the music ended up growing on me. Like I went from listening to it and being like, not really liking it, but then I kept going back to it because it was intriguing. And there were catchy songs, like At a Crawl was fucking catchy. But it was just different, and their time signatures were different. They weren't doing verse, chorus, bridge bullshit. They were writing, as they say, math songs in a lot of those songs. And then
teaching civics and civility at the most road of schooling. You can hear multiple languages. I came back here on an international course of civics and civility in front of my estate, drinking gallons of water with gas. I don't drink civilians' water. It's against my French Huguenot extraction to parlay into so much deviancy. My father's father fought in the war 1812. I was born in the whereabouts of a place called Savannah, Georgia. Elegant and refined, still tuned like a beam in the sky. I feel truly honored to be graced the pages of the Meaningful David program, into too much civilian waters. Only the civilian waters produced by my anal glands. The train is a machine on fire, hardwired. Man and machine, two sides of the same devil. You must forgive I'm not in a suit, but the weather is just unforgiving. This was written, grace the pages of your local metro paper called When You Make Love to a Giraffe. When you make quarantine love to a seductress from the zoo called a giraffe, you must always wear stilts.